what happens in the next 20 or 30 years? And how does our next generation grow up in a godless society? The effects of that are going to be profound upon the Muslim community. And there are a number of reasons for that, which we need to be able to talk through now. This process of removing religiosity and removing God, by and large, we're talking about in our modern day context, started in the Enlightenment period. And there were a number of reasons for that. But I want to focus on one so that we can think about this as we go through the discussion in the series on Tabligh. And that was that religion was no longer seen as useful, as purposeful, as beneficial to humankind. Rather, it was seen as being backwards, as being a means to control people negatively and being a source of oppression as opposed to a source of liberation. When the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, began his movement in the cities of Mecca and Medina, the society was a society that ran towards the liberation that the Prophet gave to them. Whatever your demographic, whatever your gender, whatever your age, whatever your position in society, Islam could give you something that made your life better. It liberated society from its evil practices. They reached a point in the Enlightenment when people started to, for themselves, recognize that instead of religion being a source of liberating society from the evils and the ills, rather religion was being the source of keeping people oppressed. And so people wanted to leave religion because they saw it as a tool of oppression as opposed to a tool of helping society. Now think about some of these points and where we've reached as a society today. In every field, you can find two consecutive things, two consistencies within our society. One, God is replaced in that field. And two, there is a great degree of shallowness in that regard. I'm going to mention a few examples. And you'll see that consistently in every field, God seems to be taken out and something else replaces it instead of it. God is the blamed tool for that issue. And so God needs to be removed from that thing. Take an example of nationalism. Take, for example, the idea of our state, right? So now I have to pledge allegiance to the state. I have to pledge allegiance and be in service of the state itself. What makes me put the state as the supreme authority in my life? What places the state as that source of guidance and goodness, that thing which I live for and that thing which I die for? How have we moved from a world whereby we believe in God as being at the helm of the purpose to people's belief that now actually their state is the centrality of their purpose, the centrality of their loyalty and allegiance, such that if the state says do something or the government says do something, this is more important than anything else. Any objective truth, any morality is taken away. Look, for example, in the United States of America. Look at the shallowness of the conversation around this. We know that there is this issue around Black Lives Matter, for example. And we see systemically black male youths, of course not only, but we're talking about this particular issue, that black male youths are targeted by the system or targeted by police brutality. So now there was a group of people that decided that during the national anthem, they should kneel as a protest, as a silent protest for being gunned down, or their safety, or their position as a second or third or fourth class citizen within the country. What was the debate around? The debate was shifted, wasn't it? It was no longer about the safety and the rights of those individuals. You couldn't disrespect the flag. Or, this is a disservice to our troops that have died for you. How shallow the conversation was. But now, instead of thinking about God, rights, responsibilities, the whole conversation has shifted. And now what's most important is not defending what God expects us to defend, but rather it's defending the flag of this particular country. How have we moved from here to here within the space of such a short amount of time? How does it affect the thinking of a generation that can't have a dialogue around rights, around what God expects from you, but rather to reduce the conversation to the protection of an arbitrary piece of cloth that happens to hang on a pole? Or, for example, take the issue of feminism. This is a sensitive one, I know, and we'll come to it, inshallah, in more discussions. But the history of feminism is very important. Why did the feminist movement be created? How was it created? We're not talking about its role today, its rights and wrongs. We're talking about its earliest history. You'll notice that in the earliest history of feminism, when women were being oppressed by religion, by society, by man, the earliest feminist thinkers had to be able to create a source of the oppression in order to identify it and then say, in order for us to break from our oppression, we need to break from this thing that is oppressing us. The earliest feminist movements claimed what? God was the source of oppression on women. How so? For example, they would say, take the story of Adam and Eve. The story is what? Eve comes from the rib of Adam. And so, woman is subservient to man. Woman's creation has been at the behest of man. And then we have the story of the original sin. And so who forced us to come out of paradise? It was Eve. And so now, as a result of this, religion has prejudiced man above woman, and woman is going to be oppressed because of this. And we know also within Islam how often there are so many traditions that are mixed with religion, so many cultures mixed with religion, and people don't know how to differentiate one or the other, and oppress women in the name of religion. Religion says this, I can do this. Religion says I can treat you like this, therefore I can get away with it. And so the feminist movement had to be able to create a source of the oppression. And the source of the oppression was what? God and religion. And so in order for us to break away from oppression, we need to break away from religion and God itself. Because so long as we retain God and religion, we will always be oppressed. In every field you will see science, sports, media, all of these things. Where is God present in any of these centrally? God has been replaced by all of these different fields, and materialism or atheism or agnosticism has replaced all of these in these different fields. What happens to a society without God at the helm, the centrality of its thought process? It then takes in any other ideology as replacement. It then allows to structure its society not on God consciousness, not on accountability to God, but accountability to entirely different systems of thinking. What we can see here from this video is that this is the greatest challenge that faces us in our own time. That when there is a decline in the belief in God, our own children will grow up in a society that no longer cares for God. When will they care for God? Maybe if they come to the Husayniyah. In the hope that the family structure and the family unit places God at the centrality of its remembrance. If it doesn't, then where does it get God from? Everything else replaces God. This is the single biggest challenge that we face in the Western world, the removal of God from centrality of the social space. Now, when you think about this issue and how God has been replaced in every single field, you'll look at the Quran and you will see how the Holy Prophet of Islam responded to that particular issue. How much God's remembrance is at the centrality of everything that was being told. Ati Allah wa ati Rasul. God came first. Do dhikr of Allah. Remember Allah. Allah came first. The whole centrality of the mission of the Holy Prophet of Islam was Tawheed. Every single prophet came to bring Tawheed, to establish God consciousness, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the system of the way in which they were living. This has to be the centrality of the challenge that we live in. Now, the second great challenge that the Holy Prophet of Islam had to deal with when it came to the matters of tabligh and da'wah was how to be able to spread his faith. And that was through his akhlaq and through the way in which he was as a human being. As we go through these discussions and we start talking about the issue of RSE and LGBTQ, as we start talking about the rise of the far right, as we start talking about dealing with different epistemologies and different belief systems, and how we talk about online and all of these issues, the central point of being able to spread one's faith has to be through one's akhlaq and the goodness that they show within their own humility, within their own creation, with the way in which they stand, the way in which they talk, the way in which they address other human beings. Half of the battle that we face outside in spreading our faith is because of the bad akhlaq that exists within the Muslim community. We stated yesterday that when the Holy Prophet of Islam stated, Wasilul Arham, that you should stay connected to your relatives, we had half the community in Medina overnight converting from being Jews to being Muslims. And the question we posed yesterday was simple. Well, if your act is no different to what it was yesterday when you were a member of a different faith or a different sect, then what was the purpose of your conversion in the first place? The whole purpose of the mission of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, as he says in his own words, that he was raised for the purpose of completing man's akhlaq to the fore and the pinnacle of its potential. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمُ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Now here I want to mention certain ahadith and certain stories of the Holy Prophet of Islam and of Amir al-Mu'mineen to remember his greatness tonight as we commemorate his martyrdom anniversary. But as we are talking about all of these different forms of tabligh and da'wah from tomorrow onwards, all of it has to be based on these two central premises: God and akhlaq. God and akhlaq. Because when we establish those two things, everything else will fall into place. Where we are failing as a society is because God is being replaced by every other ideology, and we are not able to export the belief in God in the same place, to replace the way in which God is being forgotten. And when it comes to the akhlaq of the Muslim community, the expectation of the Muslim community at the moment, in today's world, is so low. We don't know how to be able to respond to some of these things. I'll tell you a story, and you'll see some of the challenges that we have. Because the pressure on the Muslim community is so much today, the focus on the Muslim community, the focus has also been on the youth. As we stated earlier on yesterday and today, that when the Prophet began his mission, he said what? That the youth were the ones to be able to support him early on. The elders rejected the Prophet. What we're finding today is that the youth of the Muslim community find it the most difficult to represent their faith outside of the Husayniyah, outside of the masjid, because of the extent of the pressures on the young Muslim community to leave their faith, to be taken away from remembrance of God altogether. I remember we were sitting in one of our madrasa lessons in the mosque, We're sitting, and it was like break time. So all the shabab, they're sitting together and they're eating their chips, they're having their drinks and so on and so forth. And if you notice how they talk with each other, as parents, be observant. People of my age, we should be observant. Remember, when we were youth, we're not youth now, we shouldn't consider ourselves youth anymore, not when the beard starts to grey, but when we were youth, we had our own slang, right? We had our own terminologies that we grew up with. An easy way to understand what some of the youth are going through and the way in which they think, what they're exposed to, is to be able to see the language that they use. I'm not talking about swear words, I'm talking about slang words. And if you notice, you'll be able to appreciate the way in which they think, because the environment has taught them to imbibe that language and then speak out that language. So we were sitting there amongst some of the shabab, and they're 10, 12, 15, 17 years old. The class I was taking was about 14 years old. And you know what some of these brothers were saying about each other? They would call each other terrorists. It was the norm. So when someone did something, you know, boys, they have a bit of fun with each other, right? Someone comes and he's looking at his phone, he's playing a game. One of the other shabab comes and he knocks the phone out of his hand and walks off. You know, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of laugh, right? It's no harm. He says to him, "What are you doing, you terrorist?" I'm sitting there thinking, that's interesting. In my generation, we would never have called each other that. We did have other languages. We did have other slang words that we would use to put each other down. But as you listen, you will find actually they were calling each other more and more of this type of language. So I asked, why are you calling each other these names? What is it specifically that makes you call each other in these ways? He said, you know, in our school, we're constantly called this by the other communities. White people, they would say. We're constantly called this kind of language by other people. Every Muhammad is a terrorist now. Every Ali, every Ahmed is a terrorist now. It's just the norm within society. And so we are scared to be able to even present our religion. We're scared because we're labeled this way. And the moment we show any type of religiosity, we are connected with being a terrorist. So it's easier for us not to demonstrate our religion. What happens in a community, in a society, in a generation when they are unable to even present themselves with their own faith? Please, no one in our audience, don't say it doesn't happen to our youth. I'm talking about our community, our own Shia youth. In London, you can't get any more cosmopolitan than that. The Shabab are afraid to present their own religion. Then they told us a story. Listen to this one. They said in the religious education class, they were talking about Islam, and the teacher was teaching adhan. So what's the first line of adhan? Everyone should know this. What's the first line of adhan? Allahu Akbar. As the teacher was reciting this and calling this out and saying that the Muslims, when they do their adhan, they say Allahu Akbar, one of the kids sitting in the back went boom. Made the sound of an explosion. Why? Because today, Allahu Akbar, takbir, is associated to terrorists exploding themselves. Do you think as a young child, 8, 10, 12, 13, they're going to have the confidence to be able to express their religiosity? And what happens when they grow up being 15, 17, 18, scared to even have any religiosity? What happens when they go into university? What happens when they go into the world of work? All of this will be lost. Our situation, we have to realize the challenges that exist in our time is that God is lost altogether, and everything can replace God other than God being present. And the akhlaq and the way in which we deal with each other and interact with each other is being stripped. And the extent of the way in which we learn to be able to interact is being changed. You know where it's being changed? Online. Go online and you'll see how much vitriol people spread with each other. The things that a person would be willing to say online, they would never dare say in front of anyone else. But because there's a screen in front of them and there's anonymity, people are willing to almost say anything now. People are willing to put up any pictures of themselves, showing where they're going, because they somehow feel protected because they live within an online world. What happens when that becomes the norm within society? Well, it's already the norm. We're already going out and seeing the way people talk to each other on the streets, because that hatred is now seeped into their akhlaq, into their khulq, into their natural disposition in the way in which they are. The Muslim's primary responsibility today when spreading the faith is of these two pillars: to re-establish the presence of God and to ensure our akhlaq is of the peak and the foremost, and that when we are calling people towards Islam, we don't have to call them through the tongue, rather we call them through the akhlaq and the actions that we have. An example of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. When the Prophet was dealing with people of the harshest of nature, he had to ensure he showed the complete opposite and the softness of his nature. When he was dealing with people with a lack of understanding of each other, he had to demonstrate the extent of his understanding of the human condition, the softness of his approach. Famous story amongst the traditions when it would be that the Prophet would be sitting inside the masjid and people of different faiths, the Bedouins, would come and they would have completely different practices amongst themselves. Once a new convert came to the Prophet sitting in Masjid Nabawi. Prophet is sitting there, his companions are sitting around him. The new convert comes, sits in front of the Holy Prophet of Islam, confesses his faith, and says, I brought you a gift. What's the gift? The gift I brought you is a bottle of wine. Immediately the companions become enraged. How can you bring wine into the masjid? How dare you do this? The Prophet said, calm down, relax. And he addressed the man and he said to him, don't you know that Allah has prohibited the drinking of wine? The man said, Ya Rasulullah, I did not know this. It's my first day as a Muslim. I wasn't aware of the things that the rest of these Muslims were aware of. The man whispers something in the ear of his servant. The Prophet says, what did you say to your servant? He said, I told my servant to go and sell this wine. If I can't drink it, it's not permissible for us to drink the alcohol, then at least he can go and sell the alcohol. Rasulullah responds and says, don't you know the one that made the consumption of alcohol haram has also made its selling to be haram as well? Ya Rasulullah, I did not know that. He whispers in the ear of his servant. He says, what did you whisper in the ear of your servant? He says, I told my servant to go and spill out the wine. You see, when we deal and interact with other people, there are others who will get angry, who will lash out, who will expect you and everyone else to know what you already know. The reality is that it was the akhlaq of the Prophet that brought people together, the way in which he dealt with these individuals. An example of dealing with people, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam emphasized to call people through action, not necessarily through the tongue. And the better the quality of the action, the more likely people were to appreciate who you are as a Muslim. Famous hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Look at how Imam calls people through their action. Hadith mentions, famous, that Amir al-Mu'mineen sees an old lady walking on the streets. This lady is carrying like what we might call a bucket of water, carrying it from one place to another. As she's carrying it, she's abusing and cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Na'udhu billah. She's cursing him. And as this happens, Amir al-Mu'mineen comes towards her and says, "Oh lady, can I help you with this water? Can I carry this water for you?" She says, "Of course." She doesn't recognize Amir al-Mu'mineen. He takes this bucket of water and starts carrying it. As he's carrying it, she continues to abuse Amir al-Mu'mineen over and over and over again. He asks and says, "Why are you abusing Ali ibn Abi Talib?" She says that it was my family members that were killed in the Battle of Siffin. Because of him, I have no one in my family to be looking after me. It continues. And eventually, as they arrive at the house, it is Amir al-Mu'mineen that puts that water into the house. And having asked who this person is, eventually Amir al-Mu'mineen explains he is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This kind of story is replicated so often, whereby he just wanted his actions, his akhlaq to be able to show through. One of the famous stories mentioned about him is that as he is walking in the marketplace, he sees sitting down on the floor a slave maid crying and weeping. Amir al-Mu'mineen sits down beside her and says, "O maidservant of Allah, what is the problem?" She says, "My master gave me money to go and buy dates. I went and bought the dates. My master is angry with me for these were not the dates that he wanted. He's told me to go and exchange it. The person whom I bought them from will not exchange it. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting here. I don't know what to do. I can't go back to the house. I won't go back to the shop." Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Come with me." They go towards the shop. He comes towards the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper doesn't recognize Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says to her, the shopkeeper, "This woman, she's a maidservant. She can't go back to the house unless you exchange the dates for the ones that the master wants." He says, "I don't want to exchange the dates. That's it. Take it and go." A second time, Amir al-Mu'mineen asks, "Please exchange it for her. Look at the state this poor woman is in." You know what the hadith says? The man comes and pushes Ali ibn Abi Talib away on his chest. "Go," he responds. At this point, a crowd begins to come round and sees that Amir al-Mu'mineen has been pushed. They say, "Don't you know whom you've just pushed? This is the Caliph. This is the one who is the brother, the cousin, the successor of Rasulullah. You have just pushed him? How dare you do this?" They're scrambling to fight with this shopkeeper. You know what the hadith says? The shopkeeper falls to the floor, penitent. "Forgive me for what I have done, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen." Ali ibn Abi Talib says, "I had already forgiven you before you had asked me. But my thing that I ask you for forgiving you is to exchange as she had asked you to exchange in the first place." You can see the akhlaq of these individuals. The challenges that we have in our own time is that God has all but been removed, but that akhlaq has been removed from society. And that when we go, inshallah, into our series tomorrow, looking at how to do tabligh, how to be able to export our faith, all of these different issues that we're going to speak about has to be on the back of these two things: establishing the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also establishing the akhlaq within ourselves. On a night like tonight, on the night of the 19th of Shahr Ramadan, all those years ago, it was a night in which Amir al-Mu'mineen had been speaking about for a number of days in advance to come. The narrations tell us that Amir al-Mu'mineen would come and ask, "Which night is tonight?" He would come and ask and say, "Now it is the 15th night." He would come towards his son, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, and say, "Oh Hassan, it is not long until your father is taken away from you." The narration mentions that on the night of the 19th of Shahr Ramadan, Amir al-Mu'mineen would be walking in and walking out of his house, and he would look up at the sky towards where the moon would be, and he would say, indeed, it is a night like tonight. It is on a night like tonight. Again, the family members would not understand what Ali ibn Abi Talib was talking about. What do you mean when you are looking up at the sky? He would say, indeed, this is the night that was promised to me by Rasulullah. On a night like tonight, on the 19th of Shahr Ramadan, it is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen would have his iftar with different family members. The previous night he would go into the house of one of his children. The night before he would go into the house of one of his children. Tonight on the 19th of Shahr Ramadan, he would have his iftar with his daughter Sayyida Kulthum alayha salam. This was his second daughter, the youngest of his daughters to be from the children of Fatima alayha salam. The hadith tells us and mentions that Amir al-Mu'mineen would come to break his iftar with Sayyida Kulthum, and she would give to him different things to be able to eat from his iftar. The narrations mention different things are given to him. For example, it is given to him that he would be given a little bit of bread. He would be given some salt, and he would be given some milk. He turns towards his daughter Kulthum and says, "Oh my dear daughter, since when have you known Ali ibn Abi Talib to break his fast with more than 2 things? Oh my dear daughter, do you wish for Ali to stand on the day of judgment to be held to account for longer than what he already has to? Oh my dear daughter, take away one of these 3 things." As a daughter, what do you take away? Do you take away the milk which would give the burning throat of Ali ibn Abi Talib some solace? Do you take away the bread, or do you take away the salt? It is said that she took away the milk from Ali ibn Abi Talib to break his fast with. This is the situation that Ali ibn Abi Talib found himself on the night of the 19th of Shahr Ramadan. It is said that Ali ibn Abi Talib goes and performs his ghusl, that he spends his night in ibadah and recitation of the Holy Quran. As he is walking in and out of that house, he is looking out and he is seeing now that the moon is in front of him. This is the night in which has been predicted by his brother Rasulullah. It is said now that Amir al-Mu'mineen is spending these last hours with his family members. He calls towards his son Imam al-Hassan. He says to him, "Oh Hassan, go and collect the people for Salat al-Fajr. You would go there and lead them in this prayer. Go towards the masjid and bring everyone together." Amir al-Mu'mineen is now walking out of his house for this last time. As he does so, he comes out, and it is said that in front of him is a flock of geese. As he comes towards this flock of geese, he begins to tell his daughter Kulthum, he says, "Oh my dear daughter, feed them, and if you cannot feed them, free them, for Allah will give them their rizq." It is even in this last moments, these last hours of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that he is remembering the rights of the other creations in front of him. It is said now that he goes in towards the masjid of Kufa. As he enters, he sees this man Ibn Muljim lying down asleep. This is the man that has been sent to kill him. And now it is said that he wakes him up. The hadith mentions that Ibn Muljim awakens from his sleep. There is a line of poetry that is said after this. It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "I call him towards life whilst he calls me towards death. I want to revive his way of living whilst he wants to strike me with the sword." Amir al-Mu'mineen now comes and he begins his prayer. You can imagine what the situation is now for the whole family to know that these are the last moments of Ali. This is the same Ali that was born within the Kaaba. This is the same Ali that would spend his nights in sujood. This is the same Ali that would be looking after the orphans and the widows. But now this will be the Ali that is going to have the blood of his body coming over himself. It is said now that as he goes into that state of salah, he begins to perform his prayer. Ibn Muljim comes from behind him. He unsheathes the sword. As Ali is in the worship between him and Allah, Ibn Muljim comes and strikes Ali ibn Abi Talib on the head. It is said at this moment that the earth begins to shake, that the archangel Jibreel calls out, that that the earth begins to shake, that Jibreel begins to call out, Tahaddamat arkan al-huda, that the pillars of guidance have been struck as well. It is said that Ali ibn Abi Talib falls towards the floor in this moment. He calls out towards Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam to come and finish the prayer. They have to live, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, this man of such strength, they have to lift him up and take him out of Masjid Kufa. It is said that they capture Ibn Muljim, they bring Ibn Muljim towards him. At this point, the hadith mentions that Lady Kulthum comes running out of the house. She looks into the eyes of Ibn Muljim and says, "Oh Ibn Muljim, what have you done to my father? How have you created this atrocity that you have done?" The narration mentions that Ibn Muljim responds and says, "I swear by Allah, I doused this sword in so much poison that if it was to have struck 1,000 individuals, it would dispatch all of them towards the afterlife." This is the amount of poison that is running in the head of Amir al-Mu'mineen at this moment. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين، ماتم علي يا علي.
Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar, louder, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar. Your young children, how will they see an empty home and you no more, no more Zahra, now their father, who will console their pain and tears? They will cry rivers of tears, all alone, shattered hearts yearning for their father. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar. The sky is silent, the air is grieving. Hassan and Hussein left orphaned. Young Zainab's eyes are filled with grief. Alone Abbas weeps in silence. Your fragrance, your pure presence, your essence will remain in the hearts of your sons. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Haydar, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya मोमिनो मातम करो सब हैदरे करार का. मोमिनो मातम करो सब हैदरे करार का. मोमिनो मातम करो सब हैदरे. सब मिलके बुलंद आवाज से मोमिनो मातम करो सब हैदरे कर. सर दो पारा हो سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم، ماشاءاللہ، حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کر، رنگ چہرے کا اڑا لب کانپتے ہیں بار بار، 3 دن سے درد کا عالم ہے، دل ہے بے قرار، زخم کھا کر زہر میں ڈوبی ہوئی تلوار کا، سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم سب حیدر کرار کا، ماشاءاللہ، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر، دیکھ کر حال علی ایک پل نہیں زہرا کو چین، قبر پیغمبر پہ آ کر سیدہ کرتی ہے بین، غم سے تھراتا ہے روضہ احمد مختار کا، سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم کرار، غش میں ہے کلثوم زینب کے نہیں رکتے ہیں بین، پیٹتے ہیں سر حسن بے تاب ہے مولا حسین، آ گیا لمحہ علی کے آخری دیدار کا، سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم کرار کا، ماشاءاللہ جی، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کر، روئی زینب دیکھ کر بابا کا سر جب خون میں تر، رو دیے شیر خدا زینب کے بازو چوم کر، آ گیا منظر نظر میں شام کے بازار کا، سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کر، فاتح بدر و احد پر ظلم یہ کیسا ہوا، جن کے قدموں کی دھمک سے باب خیبر کانپ اٹھا، اٹھ نہیں سکتے سہارا لے کے بھی دیوار کا، سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا، مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا، مومنو ماتم کرار کا، مومنو سب حیدر کرار سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے سرد و پارا ہو گیا ہے خلق کے سردار کا مومنو ماتم کرو سب حیدر کرار کا مومنو ماتم کرو سب جزاکم اللہ خیر سورۃ المبارکۃ الفاتحہ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا نبي الله السلام